Tower Defense X is a strategy game on the Roblox platform affiliated with the YouTuber John Roblox. The game takes place in a heavily modern warfare setting with its fine variety of weapons, equipment, and armaments, while being able to show off some slightly futuristic elements. This is the second part of a series I've made on the towers and weapons of the game and determining of its real-world counterparts. So if you haven't watched the first, I suggest watching it. Watch it in the audio if you want. Just as mentioned in the last video, feel free to show any constructive criticism down in the comments sections. Learning is awesome. Now without further ado, let's get started. Hold on, before we really start the video, the channel now has a new Discord server. Yay! The server is for you to interact with other people with similar interests and most certainly, me. So if you want to have fun with people like you, join this Discord server now. The link is in the description and pinned comment. Now before I actually start the video, I have mistakes to correct from the last video. First off, for the operator. From part 1 I initially called this weapon at the level X5 an SKS, then I tried correcting it afterwards and say that it's a modified M14. Well, the correction needs a correction since it's actually an H-car, which is in similar vein to the SKS and M14 for it being modified. This time, it's a modernized version of the M1918 Browning Assault Rifle or the BAR. Next correction, I said in the last video that the turret used on the Humvee looks like it doesn't have a gunner on it and that can't exist. Well, that does exist. First off, the weapon model wasn't an M2 Browning, which needs to be controlled on top of the vehicle. It is instead an RCWS M230, which is controlled from the interior of the vehicle itself. This is specifically the M30LF variant, one designed to be on the Humvee when it's normally on an Apache helicopter. And finally, the claimer for the mine layer are indeed manually detonated, but the claimer will detonate anything that triggers its blasting cap, which means that something like a tripwire can detonate it. So yeah, it could really act like a traditional landmine. Alright, on to the actual video. First on this list is the patrol boat. Now, patrol boats are naval vessels in which their purpose is for coastal defense, border security, law enforcement, observation, and many others. Well, in the game that we take place in, it's for mowing down enemies so that we can slow down our inevitable demise. For the first two levels of the same path, the patrol boat takes the form of a rigid hull inflatable boat, or RHIB for short. Let's call it a RIB. Normally, the purpose of a RIB is supposedly to be a safety or rescue boat, but this one's modified to have weaponry on it. But most importantly, the model of the boat in-game takes resemblance to that of a deep V rigid hull. Now, the gun on the RIB can't seem to resemble any gun. It's either something that were not integrated on our RIB, or just flat out non-existent. Either way, the best thing we can assemble to it is to M2 Browning machine gun, since it's similarly slim to what's used in game. Now moving on to the top path, level 3X, now we've really got a patrol boat, although the same size as the RIB anyway. It takes resemblance to a fast attack craft. This craft in particular seems to be of the CB90 class boat, a perfect boat of this category. Once again, the gun used to be mounted on that boat is the M2 Browning machine gun. This gun is mounted on the CB90 throughout level 3 to 5X, although on level 5X there seems to be this thing in the back of the boat which shoots missiles. Yes, such thing did exist. Onto the bottom path, level X3, the boat is now instead the PBR Mark II, which is mounted with the naval turret. I could not identify what the turret specifically is, as the model is very generalized. And yes, the flamethrower naval turrets do exist, but not for this boat in particular. Well, that's scary. Moving on finally throughout the levels of level X4 to X5, the boat is now a river monitor, the ones used through the Vietnam War, as this boat is a modified version of an LSM-6. It's a modified for one example being the turret in front of it is a flamethrower, which is a common weapon used in this specific war as an environment that was pretty fitting for this kind of weapon, and it was banned, for the good at least. On the level X5, they have traditional turrets by the back of the boat, in which I believe was integral in the first place. Alright, on to the second. Now to the farm. The farm isn't an actual agricultural farm, but it's more of a helipad or a heliport that's a destination for airdrops to be dropped to. Now generally, an airdrop is a type of airlift where they would drop supplies upon soldiers that were isolated or unable to get supplies themselves. They were oftentimes blessed with essentials such as weapons, equipment, food, rations, and such others. We're not going to talk about its levels and how it progresses, but more rather what type of such tower it is. Now, it's some sort of helipad of course, but it's not quite since there's only airdrops rather than the helicopter itself. And there's no such things as platforms in which airdrops specifically arrive in. Airdrops are supposed to be dropping in places near the soldiers, not in a specific place. Now, what type of helipad is it? Well, since theoretically you could place it anywhere, you could say that it's any type of helipad, but with the exclusion of the rooftop, shipboard, and hospital types of helipad since, well, no, you can't do such. And what type of airdrop is it? It seems to be more of a high velocity airdrop, since it's really one parachute to slow the fall, and there's only money in it, so there's no need to treat it so delicately. Those can't break, can it? Or are there weapons in there, the upgrade icons say? Well, I don't know. Now, the plane that drops the supplies is called the C-130. You may say that this looks and sounds familiar to the more popular AC-130, and you would be right. Both planes came from the same company, Lockheed Martin. Both planes have the same structure, it's that they serve different purposes. The more iconic AC-130 is an attack plane armed with an array of weaponry, while the C-130 is an unarmed plane but it's designed to deliver cargo and supplies, exactly what the game portrays. Yep, it's a pretty short one, not a lot to say here. Next we have on the list is the barracks. A barracks is a building or multiple ones that houses soldiers or any other military personnel. In short, it's a military base for people to have a cozy night to sleep in. Alright, for the model of the tower itself, it doesn't have any real world counterparts I can base it off to. The only thing I can think of from the looks of it is that it starts off in a standard 10 cam into a fortification. Alright, onto the unit instead. On the base level, the unit first starts with the Barrack M9 pistol, which has a reflex guard and a flashlight attached to it, with those attachments seeming to have yellow accents. Level 2, he wields a G36C. C, meaning that it's a compact version of the weapon in the G36 family. That just means it's just a submachine gun. Now, onto the top pad, now level 3X, it's a little bit of... well, the in-game unit seems to be holding the same weapon, but the upgrade icons seem to be saying otherwise. Both icons have him wielding an FN SCAR, specifically the one chambering 7.62 by 51mm, or the SCAR H to be more precise. But really he doesn't, it's most likely scrapped. Moving on to level 5X, he now wields a railgun. Hear me out, its structure seems to be reminding me of a USAS-12, an automatic shotgun similar to the shotgunner's AA-12. But that's the only thing I could tell from it. Moving on to the bottom pad, one of the units now has an M202 flash, which is a special type of rocket launcher that could fire multiple rockets at once. Wouldn't you think it would be perfectly fitting for this to be used by another tower, especially when they use a weapon that didn't exist? I wonder what said tower could be. And by the way, the cosmetics of the M202 wielder is a direct reference to John Matrix, who was played by Arnold Schwarzenegger in the 1985 film Commando. Next on level X4, there's now a unit that wields a ballistic shield, for protection of course, and a revolver on his offhand, which you can tell from its rotating cylinder. Now let's talk about each weapon first. The ballistic shield would have no resemblance to any type of modern day shield, but because of its triangular shape, this resembles more to a kite shield to me, albeit quite a pretty old type of shield, but it's the best thing we've got. And with his revolver, the closest thing we've got to it is the BFR revolver, or the big frame revolver for short. This is mainly because of the cylinder being much more bigger and longer, in which therefore could house bigger cartridges. The revolver is a pretty weird looking one as well. There's a lot of extra space by the railing, jeez. It's almost like it is designed so that you can wield it with two hands. And lastly, of level X5, the unit got himself an M2 flamethrower, which was quite a destructive weapon, which made it kind of controversial to cook living conscious sentient human people into medium rare steak. And if you didn't know, the size of the flame in the real world is still bigger than the one in game. Yeah, I also thought that was overkill enough. Next, on to the Grenadier. Now, a Grenadier from a historical standpoint is a soldier in which the purpose is to have their entire expertise to be throwing hand grenades. They were specifically for storming operations, destroying fortifications, and most importantly, crowd control. With the current technology that we have, the need for explosive exclusive troops seems to be a bit redundant, for reasons being that grenades are now regularly issued within the common soldier. Although yes, there are some exceptions when some soldiers are designated to have more explosives than usual, similar to those with rocket launchers, but for a really grenade-only soldier, they never really exist anymore. But if we're gonna talk about historically, yes, the Grenadiers were really there back then, and were also kind of significant. I'm referring to the Grenadiers of the 18th century, the ones designated with said grenades and were the only ones with it. They were especially more important in sieges and other assault operations. Now finally onto his weapons. By the base level, he holds an M26 grenade, one of the used to be standard issue explosives which get replaced afterwards. Since it looks like a skinned pineapple, they call it the lemon grenade, or the lemonade. Starting from the top pad, level 3X, now we got an actual pineapple looking grenade called the MK2. The reason for so is that when the grenade explodes, the pineapple skin will act as shrapnel which will travel to much further distance compared to the explosion itself, hopefully affecting anyone in the vicinity. Next, on the level 4X, he's holding an M24 stick grenade, or more natively speaking, a Stielhandgranate, a German grenade that is exceptional in looks since it clearly is a stick and not the usual baseball looking thing, but it's also so that it can be tucked in the uniform's belt. Now finishing the top path, level 5X, he now wields an M84 flash grenade. And yes, it is a flash grenade and not the standard explosive grenade. Flashbangs are meant for the target to be stunned or incapacitated while still being unlethal or not cause serious damage. This flashbang, however, is actually just an explosive in disguise, and in no way, shape or form this stuns the enemy. Just watch how this becomes more ironic later on. Moving on to the bottom path, to level X4, now this looks absolutely ridiculous, doesn't it? It looks like some sort of padding and expand on those handles, like you get what I'm saying, right? Well, nothing like this really existed, so moving on to the level X5. Does this look familiar? Yes, it does, because this is the Stielhandgranate M24 that was mentioned earlier, which this time is more futuristic in design and has a bigger head in order to presumably cause a bigger explosion. Well, that did exist, and it's called the bundle charge or the Jabal de Ladung, in which soldiers improvise by taking the heads from multiple stick grenades and then bundle it up into one. This makes the grenade have a much more bigger radius and therefore making it much more effective against tanks and buildings. And remember when the level 5X grenade was a stun grenade and didn't stun anything? Well, this path is the one that actually stuns the enemies. Oh my god! The EDJ. Another one of these completely fictional towers with no real life counterparts. The purpose of this tower in the game is supposedly for it to be boosting the morale of the soldiers, making them perform better in a battle. Yes, boosting the morale of your soldiers is a thing obviously, but it is something you do in a specific time to motivate your men when the opportunity arises. There's not really a specific soldier task to do this specific task, but if we're going to talk about historically, such soldier of this type did somewhat exist. During the time when muskets were in use, so around 15 to the 1800s, there were these soldiers called drummers. They played the drums whenever marching or in the beat of reloading muskets. But most importantly, these drummers boosted the morale of his fellow soldiers. I guess the military drummers were the direct inspiration to this tower, but they had been depicted in a modern setting with a random goober blasting a boombox, and now it looks stupid. And finally, we got John. John here is an interesting case. The tower itself is a self-insert of one of the game's developers, John Roblox. The tower is heavily based on another tower from another Roblox tower defense game, John again from Tower Defense Simulator. This is most likely to continue the legacy of this tower after it was replaced by the much more generic militant tower. Now if we try to base this from an actual tower, no, there's simply not a military designation where you wear a chef's hat in battle. Okay, now onto the weaponry. By the base level until level 2 of both. By the base level, he wields an M1911A1, a more modern version of the much older 1911 in order for it to be a much more suitable weapon in battle. Next, let's start with the top path, level 3X. He now wields a Desert Eagle, which also has this camo of a white tiger on it, nice touch, which is more synonymous with John's brand in that it's also the base weapon for the original John in TDX. Anyway, the Desert Eagle is a handgun with the gargantuan bullet of the 50 AE ammunition. So this thing is just a cannon within the palm of your hands that you can fire repeatedly and spontaneously. I mean, this thing is just a literal wrist breaker. Level 4X, John now dual wields these eagles. Now trying to dual wield guns is definitely impractical and you would definitely look stupid trying to do this, especially with a gun like a Desert Eagle, which I said earlier, blows your damn arms off. But hey, does it really look stupid if you're in a video game and you're throwing logic out the window for some badassery with two hand cannons? Finally onto level 5X, he now looks more reminiscent of the max level version of this TDS self, with his juggernaut-like appearance and his menacing aura. Talking about this weapon, the thing he actually uses is the M240, one of the more iconic machine guns that were used in the modern US military. And the weapon that he has hoisted on his back that he actually doesn't use is the BFG-50 sniper rifle, which was somewhat infamous for being able to chamber a big round like a 50 caliber while being cheap and simple by being single shot. Kind of like a musket that actually does something if you ask me. But also, it was most likely there because John did buy a BFG back then prior to the game's development, in which he definitely did not spend 5 grand on. John was a gun fanatic, is all I'll say. Alright, to the bottom pad, level X3, he was a VPR-12 shotgun, a Russian semi-automatic shotgun taking in shape of an AK-47. With it being semi-automatic means it can have a drum magazine. This type of gun is in similar vein to the AA-12, which is what shotgun are used. Now finally to the level X5. About his appearance first, prior to this level he slowly progresses to be wearing beige colored armor until he turned to this. Now this makes him more resembling to the guy from Doom, which is also one of the things that make up his chaotic personality. Hell, most if not all of the in-game soundtracks are heavy metal songs that are just so reminiscent of Doom. Onto the weapons, he still uses the same BAPR-12s, but guess what? He's now dual wielding his weapons again. Well, at least this time it might serve something, since a complete moto with 2 shotguns with the drum magazines will at least make a difference than 2 handguns that will probably only hold 7 bullets, but might also break your damn wrist before you even finish half of a magazine. Moving on from that, his ability to use his axe when nearby an enemy. Oh look, he's able to use a backup weapon as it should be. Now if we get his top pat version to use the BFG, then we might be actually onto something. Kidding aside, looking at the axe, I can't help but admire it and get confused about it at the same time. First off, it looks so damn cool. Second, how would this work in a practical sense? I mean, bloody hell, the axe head already looks so absurd. It's literally bigger than the handle itself. The butt looks so unnecessarily big that it could be the axe head itself. And assuming that those spikes were for penetrating armor more easily and or just to pin the enemy, when the weapon itself is a Doom Crucible-esque weapon that cuts off anything like butter, why add that detail then? Oh yeah, the Doom references don't end just yet. The design of the axe, as in the blade being some sort of a lightsaber, is also a reference to the Doom's Crucible, holding all the same details as previously mentioned. And that's all the towers for part 2. Hope you really do like this one. A part 3 is definitely coming soon after the first part did so well in my opinion. And if you want to see part 3 and also show support for the channel, please do let me know by leaving a like and subscribe. Any type of support in the channel is greatly appreciated. And as said before, if you want to show additional information and or make corrections for my mistakes, feel free to comment. Everyone loves to learn something new every day. That's it for today. Remember to join the Discord server. Thank you for watching the Barrack channel, and to the waters I go. Peace.
Zone C.